Who is the strongest character? This question has baffled scholars, theory crafters, and great thinkers alike. Forums, roundtables, and discussions have formed around such questions, and in some sections of the internet, asking such a question is an unspoken taboo. One must not ever ask any community, be it an anime or games, who the strongest or the best character is, because more often than not, there are no straightforward answers. Despite this rather odd history, this is exactly what we're going to talk about in this video. The 5 strongest character in Honkai Star Rail, but in terms of the lore. Before we discuss that though, if you want to see more Honkai Star Rail content, do consider subscribing to the channel. As I have so subtly hinted in the intro, figuring out who the strongest is, even in the context of the lore, is not an easy task. It's largely subjective, and if we enter into the realm of power scalers with feat comparisons and achievements, this gets real technical real quick. So before I start with the video, I have to lay down a few ground rules just so you know where I'm coming from. First, I'm really only comparing characters that are among the 5-star summonable characters, so no 4 stars. This also means that I'm not going to consider characters who are mentioned in the lore but not summonable, like the Xianzhou Alliance generals, characters like Elio, or some legendary figure we haven't seen. Secondly, we are going to be judging these characters based on what we know about them, and not their potential or hints of their powers. Argenti is a good example of this, as while we have seen them escape both Penacony and a giant swarm bug, we don't really know anything else about their abilities in terms of the lore, so we will just have to take them as they are right now. Another example is Clara. I know Clara E6 is super strong, but in the lore, she's just a little girl with no shoes on. Finally, this list is not in any particular order, and at the end of the day, it's largely just my personal opinions based on my limited knowledge of the lore, so just keep that in mind. Now, despite me saying it's not in any particular order, I'm actually going to start with someone I think is likely the strongest one here. Someone most of you are likely already expecting to show up on this list. The Emanator of Nihility, Acron. While the rest of the candidates on this list can be reasonably argued as to their placement, I think most of us can agree that Acron is right now one of the strongest characters to have appeared in the story. Not only is she a full-fledged Emanator, she also wields the Sword Knot, a weapon forged from the essence of reality-warping creatures. As an Emanator, her strength was more than sufficient to simply override the abilities of other Path Striders. For example, Acron was largely unaffected by the dream that Sunday had created, which affected most in the Azana system, including even the Nameless. During her fight with Aventurine, who triggered the use of his Cornerstone, Acron was able to defeat him with a single slash. If you didn't know, the Cornerstone holds about 1/10 of the power of an Emanator, and if we make a direct comparison, this basically means that Acron's single slash was enough to overpower 10% of another Emanator's sheer strength. This slash not only defeated Aventurine and cancelled out his attacks, but also tore apart the boundaries of the dreamscape and left an open scar in the sky. On top of that, you have to remember that Acron knew what Aventurine was up to and reciprocated his attacks with just enough force to counteract them. She wasn't going all out. Acron also single-handedly went up against, presumably, the entire Everflame mansion. Now, we don't know if the rest of Duke Inferno's children were present when Acron attacked them, but alone, she was capable of defeating Duke Inferno with little to no problems. Her mental fortitude is also likely strengthened against possible attacks, given Black Swan herself, an experienced memo keeper, was overwhelmed by Acron's own memories. Even compared to the other potential Emanators, Acron likely has been one for far longer, and even her previous life was nothing but battle, meaning she has tremendous amounts of experience. Suffice to say, unless you are extremely powerful, it will be some time before we see anyone in lore that can actually go up against Acron. Moving on, next on this list, I have to place Jinglu, who is arguably the strongest Xianzhou Alliance lore character we have met so far. Before you start quoting me on some of the other generals, yes, I am aware they exist, but as I've mentioned, I'm only covering summonable 5-star characters, so based on that, I think she deserves a place here. Jinglu has been around for a long time, given she is a long-life race of the Xianzhou Alliance. Her exploits go back centuries, and at the height of her influence, she commanded a group that was functionally the A-team of the Xianzhou Alliance, the High Cloud Quintet. These were the people who the Alliance sent when there was an impossible mission to be completed, and each time they were assigned to something, it would be completed with no exceptions. As a group, they defeated the Borisins of Thalassa, destroyed an alliance between Wing Weavers and Hyokonims, and even defeated the living planet Ketu Mirage. Yeah, they defeated a living planet. While you might attribute this to them working as a group, later on, we see that Jinglu is able to easily defeat most, if not all, the members of this group single-handedly. During the fiasco at Scale Gorge Waterscape, Jinglu herself defeated an uncontrollable draconic abomination, one made from the body of an emanator of abundance. If you didn't know, fighting an emanator of abundance is difficult, as no matter what amount of damage you inflict on them, they would just regenerate indefinitely. Both Blade and Danfeng, along with most of the Cloud Knights, could not put it down, and it took Jinglu to do it. Now, what really puts her above the rest is the fact that everything I've mentioned so far has happened in the past. Since then, she has not only continued to grow in strength, but also gained additional power. Not only has she honed her swordsmanship and abilities, she has even gained some control over her mana-struck condition. Those afflicted by this condition often lose themselves in a frenzy of rage and battle and become extremely uncontrollable and volatile. Through sheer effort and willpower, Jinglu overcame this limitation as she is able to access the added strength of the condition while still retaining her mental faculties. In fact, when she first became Mara-struck, it took a literal army of Cloud Knights along with Jin Yan, her former apprentice, to suppress her. And even then, she still managed to escape while the Cloud Knights suffered great losses. When we meet her in the current setting, she easily outpaces Yanqing in their little competition and is able to even identify his fighting style along with all his weaknesses just from hearing the sound of Yanqing's sword swings alone. Also, did I mention that since her mana-struck condition, Jinglu has mostly fought blindfolded? She even went toe-to-toe with Blade numerous times without so much as breaking a sweat and was easily able to overpower him and kill him multiple times while blindfolded. On top of all of this, the last time we see her, she even hints at knowing how to end the Eon of Abundance once and for all, though admittedly, we don't know the details of her scheme. Jinglu is without a doubt an absolute monster on the battlefield, and I have a feeling we haven't even seen her at her full power. Everything we have seen is essentially her just playing around. She wanted to be caught and she practically surrendered rather than fighting to her fullest, and why I think she likely is one of the strongest characters so far. I can't even imagine what would happen if she somehow becomes an Emanator. Next up on this list is another member of the High Cloud Quintet, the Immortal Blade. During his time with the Quintet, Blade was more of their equipment manager. He forged the weapons each members would use and helped them maintain these weapons. While the members were indeed strong, Blade's weapons essentially boosted their capabilities practically to the moon. Despite being their official blacksmith, Blade was still able to keep up with most of them during battles, and that itself speaks volumes of his fighting ability. But this was years ago, during a time when he was just a mortal. You see, due to some illegal experiments, the details of which I won't get into here, Blade has attained incredible regenerative abilities akin to functional immortality. While he was a mere equipment manager in the High Cloud Quintet, as part of the Stellaron Hunters, Blade is a monstrous bruiser. As far as we know, nothing can kill the man. No matter how much damage he receives, regardless of how many limbs get chopped off, Blade will regenerate. Sure, it might take some time, but without a doubt, he will return. He's even tried to unalive himself multiple times, but to no avail. This is why I think he's likely one of the strongest characters we've seen in the lore so far. If we compare him to his other team members in the Stellaron Hunters, sure, perhaps Kafka can influence his mind or Firefly can turn him into ash, but Blade would just keep coming back. I mean, the man followed Dan Heng across the stars, destroying everything in his path with very little able to stop him. In a war of attrition, Blade would win. On top of that, much like his previous boss, he also has the benefit of being afflicted by the Mara-struck. The only difference is that he has little to no control over it, but he does still benefit from the insane strength boost. While Blade might not be able to contend so easily with an Emanator like Acron or his ex-boss Jinglu, among the roster of 5 stars, I don't really see anyone who can put him down permanently. In an extended fight, Blade would eventually get the critical hit in that ends the brawl outright. Next up, we have someone who I kinda debated putting on this list more because she's a little like Blade. She's incredibly hard to kill, But at the same time, I feel some of the reasons why I think she should be here is kinda on the borders of breaking one of my own rules. I'm talking of course about Black Swan. Now, Black Swan is a memo keeper affiliated with the Garden of Recollection, meaning she follows the Aeon Fu Li and the Path of Remembrance. While it's not explicitly mentioned, Black Swan is heavily hinted to be an emanator due to her mimetic form and the abilities she possesses. As a memo keeper, she is functionally incorporeal and exists as a sentient mimetic entity. What this means is that she has no physical form to speak of and is not bound or limited by the physical universe. She can phase through objects, move into abstract locations like dreams and memories, and for all intents and purposes, she is intangible. This means that anyone fighting against her can't really do anything to her unless they have some method of dealing with the incorporeal. In fact, if I understand it right, a mimetic entity is almost like a sentient concept, which is probably super impossible to defeat, let alone kill. On the other hand, while most can't even touch her, she can easily enter the minds of others, often without them even noticing. The problem is that I'm not sure if she has any specific combat abilities to speak of. In terms of actual combat, we have seen her go toe-to-toe with the death beam and walked away from it, as well as survive her fair share of Penacony. That said, this did occur in a location with high levels of memoria, a location ideal for a memo keeper like herself, so despite others not able to do harm to her, she might not be able to do the same to them. But I'm gonna lean more towards the idea that she can. Plus, there's a lot of other ways she can go about defeating someone without having to physically harm them. She can easily enter your mind, figure out your weaknesses and secrets, and who knows what else she can do while she's in there. Maybe she can alter your memories or put you in a catatonic state of shock. The only person she seems to have had trouble with is Acron herself, who had such a traumatic past that even Black Swan was left panting and wheezing after entering her mind. Based on this, when I compare her to the other 5 stars, despite her perhaps not having immense combat power, I don't see many others who can easily defeat her, while she can eventually render her opponent unable to fight. Earlier, I talked about how a fight with Blade is one of attrition, and that's one of the reasons why I felt he deserved to be considered one of the strongest, and that kinda applies to Black Swan as well. Plus, since we know that March is gaining new abilities through accessing her memories, it might be possible that Black Swan is able to do this as well, but this kinda goes against one of my earlier rules, so I'll just leave it at that. Finally, we reach the end of this list with the last person I think is super strong lore-wise, and it's the Cloud General himself, Jin Yan. For some reason, there are a lot of characters from the Xianzhou Alliance here. I wonder if that's intentional. Anyways, Jin Yan, much like Jinglu and Blade, was also part of the High Cloud Quintet, but he was just basically their intern. He was the youngest and most inexperienced member of the group, but still managed to survive on their many excursions and even fight alongside them as equals. Despite that, the man has come a long way, having been promoted and even inheriting the Lightning Lord, a massive energy construct with immense destructive powers, strong enough to even hold down an emanator. While Jin Yan did have some difficulty during his fight with his former master Jinglu, he has since fought toe-to-toe with Ventilia, an emanator of destruction, and in countless battles in the past as part of the quintet. On top of that, Jin Yan is well known to be a master strategist and has led countless skirmishes against the forces of the Abundance. Even if his combat prowess isn't top tier, though I doubt any would argue that, his tactical mind brings him an advantage few on this list currently possess. He can likely make up for any shortcomings in terms of strength through careful planning. When compared to the others on this list, it's difficult to say whether he can really beat any of them. Acron, Jinglu, and even Black Swan may be tough for him to beat single-handedly. But against all the other 5 stars on the 5-star roster, I think Jin Yan is able to more than hold his own and likely is able to easily defeat most of them. So that's basically the 5-star characters I think is the strongest as of the latest story in 2.3. There are several that I hope to include here, but given I don't want to drag this out any further, I'll just have them as honorable mentions. I think Imbiber Lune, Welt, and the main character all can likely be considered powerful in their own right, but against these 5, I don't really see them inching their way in. They are without a doubt powerful, but at this point, likely not at the pinnacle of the strongest. That does it for this video though. In the future, perhaps I'll cover the top 5 characters with the most potential, but for now, this will have to do. If you feel someone else among the 5-star roster of summonable characters fits on this list, share your opinions in the comments. If you had fun watching the video, do consider liking and subscribing to the channel. Thanks so much for watching, and as usual, have a nice day.